The woman sitting across from me at the dinner table slid a notarized document toward my son and told him to sign on the dotted line. My son picked up the pen. He had no idea that the signature he was about to put down would hand over everything I had ever built to a woman who had been stealing from us both for 3 years. I opened my mouth to speak, and what came out changed the course of every life in that room. But that moment did not begin at that dinner table. It began 5 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in April, when a plumber I trusted called me with 4 words that made my blood go cold. To understand what happened, I need to take you back to the beginning. My name is Thomas Caldwell. I am 67 years old. I live in a small house on Wren Lane in the town of Cedar Falls, Virginia. Population 4,000 and change. The kind of place where the post office closes at noon on Saturdays and the only traffic jam happens when the high school band practices on Main Street. I drive a 1994 Ford pickup with more rust than paint, but it starts every single morning without complaint. The seat has a permanent dip on the driver's side where 30 years of my weight have shaped the leather into something that fits me better than any chair in my house. I have a golden retriever named Biscuit who follows me to the hardware store like he is on payroll. He sits by the door while I browse the screw aisle, and the owner gives him a biscuit from a jar behind the register that I suspect exists only for him. Every morning I wake at 5:15, put on coffee in the same dented percolator my wife bought at a yard sale in 1989, and sit on the back steps watching the fog lift off the creek behind the house. I eat 2 eggs over easy, 1 slice of rye toast, and half a grapefruit. Then I walk Biscuit to the end of the road and head to the Cedar Falls Diner, where I sit in the 3rd booth from the window and drink a 2nd cup with whoever happens to be there. Most people in town think I was a mail carrier. That is partly true. I did carry mail for the Postal Service for the first 11 years. But for the 26 years after that, I did something else entirely. I was a United States Postal Inspector. Federal law enforcement. I investigated mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, financial crimes that would make your head spin. I put people in federal prison for forging documents, stealing inheritances, running schemes so elaborate they could have been novels. I retired 8 years ago. I do not talk about it. There's a box in my closet with a badge and a commendation letter signed by the Postmaster General. Nobody in Cedar Falls has ever seen it. I fix screen doors. I sharpen lawnmower blades. I am the old man on Wren Lane with the rusty truck and the slow dog, and I prefer it that way. My wife Helen would have laughed at that. She always said I was the most quietly stubborn man she had ever met. Helen died 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer. The slow kind, if there is such a thing. The kind that gives you enough time to memorize every detail of the face you are losing. I remember the way she smelled like lavender soap even in the hospital. I remember the sound of her breathing in the last week. Shallow and careful, like she was trying not to use up whatever air she had left. I remember reaching across the bed 2 weeks after the funeral and feeling nothing but cold sheets and a silence so heavy it had its own gravity. I still make coffee for 2 some mornings, not on purpose. The hand just reaches for the 2nd mug before the mind catches up. I leave it on the counter, full, until it goes cold. Then I pour it out and rinse the mug and put it back. I do not know why I do this. Maybe it is habit. Maybe it is prayer. Maybe there is no difference. Helen had a saying she repeated so often it became the rhythm of our marriage. She would look at me over the rim of her coffee cup and say, "Thomas, a dishonest person will always tell you who they are. You just have to be patient enough to listen." She said it about neighbors, about the people I investigated, about the world. She believed no one could keep a lie running forever, that the truth leaked out in small ways, in the details people forgot to cover, in the patterns that only someone with patience could see. I did not fully understand that wisdom until the year she died, and I did not fully live it until the year I almost lost my son. My boy Daniel is my only child. He is 34 years old. He works as a finished carpenter, the kind who builds custom cabinets and mantels that people photograph for magazines. He learned the trade from Helen's father, a man named Arthur who could shape walnut with a block plane and make it sing. Daniel is good, not just skilled, good. The kind of man who stays late on a job to get the grain right because it matters to him, even if the client would never notice. After Helen died, it was just the two of us. Sunday dinners at my kitchen table, fishing at Heron Lake on the first Saturday of every month. He would call me every Wednesday evening and we would talk about nothing important and everything that mattered. That was the thing that kept me tethered to the world after Helen left it. Then Daniel met Victoria. Victoria Spencer was 36 when she walked into his life at a church fundraiser. She was a licensed real estate agent with a firm handshake and a smile that arrived half a second before her eyes caught up to it. She wore silk scarves and drove a silver sedan that always looked freshly washed. She laughed at Daniel's jokes a little too quickly. She brought a bottle of wine to our first dinner together, and it was a good bottle. Not the kind you grab from the grocery shelf, but the kind that comes in a wooden box. And I thought that was thoughtful. She complimented my house a little too specifically, commenting on the hardwood floors and the creek frontage in a way that sounded less like admiration and more like appraisal. She told Daniel his hands were beautiful, which they are, scarred and rough from years of working wood. And when she said it, there was genuine warmth in her voice that made me think I might be wrong about the appraisal look. That was the thing about Victoria. She gave you just enough real warmth to make you doubt the cold. I wanted to like her. I want you to understand that. I cooked dinner for them that first autumn, pot roast, Helen's recipe, carrots cut thick the way Daniel liked. Victoria ate 3 bites, pushed the rest around, and spent most of the evening asking when I planned to sell the house. The market was strong, she said. A property like this could fetch well above asking. She said it with her hand on Daniel's arm, and Daniel smiled the way a man smiles when he is not sure whether to be proud of his partner or apologize for her. I did not say what I was thinking. I told myself it was just enthusiasm. I told myself a lot of things that first year, and none of them turned out to be true. But I had no idea that the small things I was noticing would turn out to be breadcrumbs leading to something far worse than I imagined. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, I need you to stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this one keep reaching the people who need to hear them. What happened next is something I never saw coming, and I spent 26 years getting paid to see things coming. They married in March. The Wednesday calls continued for a while. Then they became every other week, then once a month, then only when I called first. Victoria was always in the background. I could hear her tone rising at the end of sentences like she was giving instructions. One Thanksgiving, I drove to their house with a pecan pie Helen used to make. Victoria answered in a bathrobe, looking at me like I had arrived unannounced to a stranger's home. She said Daniel was out running errands. She did not invite me in. I stood on the porch holding that pie and smelled cinnamon from inside and heard music from the kitchen, and I knew Daniel was home. I left the pie on the railing and drove back to Wren Lane with my hands damp against the steering wheel the entire ride. The distance grew the way distances do when someone is building a wall one brick at a time. There were small things. I am going to tell you about them because small things are where the truth lives. The first happened at Easter dinner, 8 months after the wedding. Victoria made a comment about my truck. She said, "Thomas, that thing in the driveway is an embarrassment. People must think Daniel's father is a vagrant." She laughed. Daniel laughed too, half a beat late, the kind of laugh that has no air in it. I looked at my son and saw something I had seen 1,000 times in interview rooms, the quick sideways glance, the checking of someone else's face before deciding how to feel. A man who builds furniture with his hands should not have to check anyone's permission to laugh. The second thing happened 2 months later. I stopped by to drop off a set of chisels that had belonged to Arthur. Victoria came out and told me Daniel was too busy for visitors. She said it sweetly, with her hand on the door frame like she was holding the house closed. Daniel did not come to the door. I heard his sander running in the garage and I wanted to walk past her, but something in her posture told me that would make things worse for him later. I left the chisels on the steps and drove home listening to the sound of gravel under my tires and the chirp of crickets through the open window, and I thought about how strange it was that a man could not receive his own grandfather's chisels in his own garage. A person who controls the door controls the house, and a person who controls the house controls the man inside it. The third thing happened at the 4th of July picnic. A young woman named Sophie from the hardware store complimented Daniel on a bookshelf he had built for the library. Victoria's face changed, a flicker like a candle in a draft. She locked her arm through Daniel's and said, "Daniel is so talented. It is a shame his client list is not bigger. Maybe if he spent less time on charity projects." Sophie's smile faded. Daniel stared at the ground. He did not defend Sophie or himself. I watched from 20 feet away, holding a paper plate, and something settled in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. The fourth thing was in September. I ran into Daniel at the hardware store. His sleeves were rolled up and I noticed his watch was gone. The silver watch Helen had given him on his 21st birthday with his initials engraved on the back. He said he lost it. He said it too quickly and his eyes went left, the way eyes go when someone is constructing a sentence instead of remembering one. My son was lying to me. The fifth thing was in October. I drove past their house and saw a man I did not recognize standing on the porch with Victoria, dark suit, leather briefcase. They were talking in the hushed way people talk when they do not want to be overheard. Victoria saw my truck and her face went blank. Not surprised, not guilty, blank, like a screen switched off. That night I sat on my porch with Biscuit and the creek making its quiet sound, and I thought about Helen's words. A dishonest person will always tell you who they are. You just have to be patient enough to listen. I was listening. I did not like what I was hearing, but I still did not act. A father carries a fear that has nothing to do with danger and everything to do with distance. I was afraid that if I pushed, I would lose Daniel entirely. Then April came. Daniel called on a Tuesday morning. His voice was rehearsed and bright. "Hey, Dad, Victoria and I are flying to Cancun this weekend. 8 days at a resort. Listen, the upstairs bathroom has been leaking and the kitchen pipes are rattling. Could you call someone while we are gone?" I sat at my table looking at a half-finished crossword. 8 days in Cancun, but he could not call a plumber himself. "I do not have a key anymore, Daniel." Victoria asked for it back. "Right. I will leave one under the blue flower pot on the side porch. Have someone come Monday. I said I would handle it. He said thanks, and the line went dead. No, goodbye. No, I love you." Just the flat silence of a connection ended by someone who got what he needed. I called Marcus Rivera that afternoon. Marcus had done plumbing around Cedar Falls for 15 years. Honest man. 3 daughters. He answered on the first ring. "Thomas, tell me, you are calling about a fishing trip." I gave him the address. Monday morning worked fine. Before I continue, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from right now. I read every single one, and knowing you are out there keeps these stories alive. Monday morning, I let myself in with the key from under the flower pot. The house smelled like Victoria's perfume, something sharp and floral that lingered like a presence that had not left. The walls were covered with photographs of Victoria at real estate dinners and charity galas. Daniel appeared in a few, standing slightly behind her, smiling carefully. There were no photographs of Helen, no photographs of me. The oak frame that used to hold Daniel's first birdhouse portrait above the fireplace had been replaced with a mirror. I stood in front of it and felt the absence of my wife so sharply it pressed against my chest. Marcus arrived at 8:30. I showed him the kitchen sink and the bathroom and told him to call when he was done. Then I drove home. It was 11:15 when my phone rang. Thomas. His voice was not right. Marcus was the kind of man who hummed while he worked, who joked while standing in standing water. The voice on the phone was not that man's voice. "Thomas, I need you to come here right now. I found something behind the bathroom wall. There is a space back there. Somebody cut into the framing and made a compartment. There are papers, a lot of papers. Some of them have your name on them. My hands went still. The crossword pencil slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. Do not touch anything. I am on my way. I drove there in 9 minutes. The kind of 9 minutes you do not remember afterward, just the blur of mailboxes and the squeal of brakes at the stop sign on Elm Street and the cold, heavy weight in your chest that comes from decades of knowing what hidden things usually mean. Marcus was on the front porch turning his cap over and over in his hands. His face was the color of drywall. He led me upstairs without speaking. The bathroom wall was open. Behind a tile panel loosened by the leak, in a space between the studs lined with plastic sheeting, sat a metal lockbox and 3 large envelopes. My chest went tight, not with surprise, with recognition. I had seen hidden compartments before in my career, but those were strangers. This was my son's house. I put on gloves and opened the first envelope. Photocopies of my property deed, altered, with my signature forged onto a transfer document assigning the property to Victoria Spencer Caldwell. The second envelope held bank statements from an account in Daniel's name at an address I did not recognize, deposits flowing in from his carpentry business for 2 years, withdrawals wired to a company called Spencer Property Holdings. The third envelope stopped my hands entirely. A letter from an attorney in Richmond addressed to Victoria, outlining steps to file for emergency conservatorship over me on grounds of cognitive decline. It referenced my age, my living alone, my limited social connections. It included a draft affidavit where Victoria would swear I had exhibited confusion and memory loss. Once granted, she would control my house, my retirement, my pension. I sat on the edge of the bathtub. The porcelain was cold through my pants. The room smelled like mildew and copper. "Thomas, what is this?" Marcus asked from the doorway. "This is a crime. That night I sat at my kitchen table in the dark and heard Helen's voice. A dishonest person will always tell you who they are." Victoria had been telling me for 3 years. I walked to my closet and knelt on the carpet that still smelled faintly of Helen's lavender, and I opened the box I had not touched since retirement. The badge felt heavier than I remembered. The commendation letter was yellowing at the edges. Beneath them was a leather notebook with every phone number of every federal prosecutor and forensic accountant and document examiner I had worked with in 26 years. My hands were steady when I opened it. They had always been steady when the work began. That was the difference between anger and duty. Anger shakes, duty holds still. Over the next 4 days, I built a case the way I had built them for decades. I confirmed no property transfer had been filed yet. I pulled incorporation records proving Victoria was the sole agent of Spencer Property Holdings. I obtained the bank records showing the wire transfers. I had a forensic document examiner named Dr. Anna Kowalski confirm the signature was a traced forgery. I met with a federal prosecutor named David Harmon and laid everything out. He said, "Thomas, this is wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation." That last one carries up to 10 years. Daniel and Victoria came home from Cancun. Daniel called to ask if the plumbing was fixed. His voice was light. I told him everything was fine. The following week, Victoria invited me to dinner on Saturday. She said she and Daniel wanted to discuss something about the future, about the house on Wren Lane. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed level. That Saturday, I drove to their house in a clean shirt. Parked down the street in an unmarked sedan were David Harmon and a postal inspection agent named Sarah Mitchell. In my jacket was every document I had assembled. The dinner table was set with cloth napkins and candles. Victoria had made roasted chicken and a salad with pears and walnuts. She poured wine and asked about biscuit, and for a moment I understood why Daniel had fallen for her. She could be warm. She could make you feel like the center of the room. That was the most dangerous thing about her. Halfway through the meal, Victoria set down her fork and Daniel cleared his throat. "Dad, we have been thinking about your situation. You are alone in that house. You are getting older. We worry." Victoria nodded with perfect concern. "Thomas, we have spoken with an attorney about options, ways to simplify things so you do not have to worry about bills and maintenance." She pulled papers from a folder beside her chair. A transfer of property, a power of attorney, a consent to conservatorship evaluation. She slid them toward me with a pen. "Nothing is final. We just want to protect you." I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen. I looked at Daniel staring at his plate with his jaw working and his hands flat on the table like he was trying to hold it down. Then I looked at Victoria and saw what 26 years had trained me to see. The flicker behind the eyes, the lean of a person waiting for the trap to close. I reached into my jacket. I set my folder on the table. One by one, I placed in front of her the forged transfer with my trace signature, the bank records showing 2 years of wire transfers into her shell company, the incorporation documents, the conservatorship letter from her attorney, Dr. Kowalski's forensic analysis, and Marcus Rivera's signed statement describing where he found everything hidden behind her bathroom wall. The room went quiet, not a pause between sentences. The quiet of a world rearranging itself. Victoria's face went white. The color drained fast and irreversible. Daniel picked up the bank statement and his hands trembled so badly the paper shook like dry leaves. "Dad," he whispered, "what is this?" "This is what your wife has been doing while you were building cabinets, son. She has been stealing from you and forging my signature. She planned to have me declared incompetent so she could take everything your mother and I spent a lifetime building. The documents behind your wall were the blueprint. Tonight was the execution." Victoria stood. Her chair scraped the floor. "Those are personal papers. You had no right." "I walked into a house that I own. A licensed plumber found a hidden compartment while repairing a leak you asked me to have fixed. What he found constitutes evidence of federal crimes. There are 2 officers in a car down the street with a warrant. I asked them to let me do this part first because Daniel is my son and I wanted him to hear it from me." Victoria's mouth opened and closed. Daniel was not looking at her. He was looking at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. The look of a man who just realized the floor he had been standing on for 3 years was a trap door and his father had caught him before he fell through. Victoria walked out. She did not run. The front door opened. I heard David Harmon's voice reading the words I had heard 100 times in my career, but never in my own family's living room. Daniel sat at the table long after. The candles burned down. The chicken went cold. I sat across from him and did not speak because sometimes the most important thing a father can do is be present without filling the silence. "Why did you not tell me sooner?" Because she would have explained it away. She would have called me confused. She needed to show you herself at her own table with her own papers. He put his head in his hands. I reached across and put my palm on the back of his neck the way I used to when he was a boy and something had hurt him. "Your mother used to say a dishonest person will always tell you who they are." I was patient, Daniel. I listened. And now it is over. The months that followed were hard in the way true things are hard. Victoria was indicted on 7 federal counts. The trial lasted 9 days. Marcus sat on the witness stand in a borrowed tie and told the jury about the space behind the wall. The jury deliberated 4 hours. Victoria was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 6 years. Spencer Property Holdings was dissolved. Every dollar was traced and recovered. Daniel filed for divorce the week after the verdict. It was uncontested. He could not stay in the house they had shared. Too many lies embedded in the walls, some of them literally. He found a workshop on the edge of town with a loft above it, a simple space with good light and a wide door for moving lumber. He set up his tools and his wood, and he started building again. The first thing he made was a picture frame, oak, hand-planed. He put Helen's photograph in it, the one of her in the garden with dirt on her knees and a tomato in each hand. He hung it above his workbench. The Wednesday calls came back, slowly at first, like a creek finding its channel after a long dry spell. Then every week, "Hey Dad, just checking in." We started fishing again at Heron Lake. Sunday dinners at my table, Helen's pot roast, carrots cut thick. Daniel joined a woodworking guild and started teaching a free class for teenagers at the community center on Saturday mornings. He says Arthur would have wanted it that way. Biscuit got old and slow and needed help with the porch steps, so Daniel built him a ramp with a gentle slope and non-slip surface and little rails on the sides. That ramp tells you everything about who my son really is when no one is building walls around his heart. Some evenings Daniel comes by after work and we sit on the porch and watch the light go copper over the creek, and we do not say much. We just sit. 2 men who lost the same woman and almost lost each other, learning how to be still together again. Biscuit sleeps between us with his chin on his paws, snoring the satisfied snore of a dog who has never once doubted that he belongs exactly where he is. Last Thanksgiving, Daniel came to my house with a pecan pie, Helen's recipe. He had learned it from a card in her recipe box with a note at the bottom that said, "Do not skip the bourbon. It is not optional." We ate at the kitchen table with the window open because the air smelled like cedar smoke from across the creek, and that smell has always meant home. After dinner, Daniel sat on the porch steps with Biscuit's head in his lap and said, "Dad, I am sorry I stopped calling." I told him he did not need to apologize. He told me he did. I let him. Sometimes an apology is not about the person receiving it. It is about the person who needs to say it out loud so they can set it down and walk forward. When I was young, I thought strength meant catching people who lied. I thought it meant building cases and winning convictions. When I worked my career, I learned that strength meant patience, watching without reacting, holding your fire until the truth could do its own work. But now at 67, sitting on my porch with my dog at my feet and my son's truck pulling into the driveway on a Wednesday evening, I know what strength really is. Strength is the willingness to love someone enough to save them from the person who is destroying them, even when saving them means showing them a truth they are not ready to see. It is the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the people you love disappear into someone else's lie. Helen knew that. She always knew. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone who loved you in the quiet, stubborn way that never asked for credit, share it with them. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. And leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. Sometimes the people who need these words the most find them because someone like you took 10 seconds to share. Good night from Cedar Falls. Go call someone who has been waiting to hear from you.